Ray Dalio describes three things are essential to life for anyone, and after studying, I understand what he meant. There are three things that are good for any person and makes anybody anything and defines our fabric of society. Is number one, good parents. Number two, a good education. And number three, equal opportunity. What this means is if you come from a good home of loving people and you have a good education behind you, that means that you can go out in the world with love, support, and maybe even a little financial backing to a small degree and have an opportunity as well as anybody else. Now, throughout a torn fabric of society, when you eliminate one of these things, maybe you had good parents, but you had no education, or maybe you lacked the education because you had bad parents. Then that ends up getting you to an adulthood of not having equal opportunity. Or perhaps you've had both, but the equal opportunity has been lost because of our systems, our tax code, and other things. So keep these in mind as we go through the video. For any of the farmers watching this, there is an ECAP payment coming out, which is an emergency commodity assistance program, and it was factored off of so many dollars per whatever the item was. So like soybeans get so many dollars per acre on your planted acres, and corn gets so many dollars on your corn. Most farmers that are watching this channel will understand what I'm talking about and already know about the program. What they may not be up to par on is the fact that it was recently reduced to where you only get 85% of it. So when this program was initiated, they told farmers to take about half the hit. So if you've lost $1, we'll pay you back 50 cents. And now they're telling you to take another 15% off of that, which is typical government. They cause the problem, then they chop you off the knees later. And ECAP was not the only part of that program. There was a 2023 and 2024 disaster relief, and it was 31 billion in aid, which was 21 for the disaster relief, and then 10 billion for the economic assistance, which is the ECAP. So the 10 billion is going to go out now. And I thought this was all supposed to be balled together initially, but the program is going out later than expected, and the 21 billion for disaster relief has no mention. My understanding is if you've had a crop insurance claim, probably the easiest way to describe it, crop insurance claim in 23 or 24, that you'll get about 90% of whatever your claim was, if we ever get the money. Now, if you've been following this channel since I decided to do these new series of videos, in my first videos I talked about the misinformation and the mentality that goes into ag, and I said I wanted to have a nice round open table discussion about it. So this is a really great channel here. I really like these guys. I listen to them every day if I can, or if I have time, or if there's something interesting in the news. And Grain Market Stuff, Grain Markets and Other Stuff is the channel name. And Joe, McKenzie, they do these shows, and what they're looking for is subscribers to their paid services, but just their show alone is a great show. Now, their March 19th show, the topic of their show was what I just got done showing, the ECAP payments, which is obviously a hot topic for many. So I thought for this video what we'll do is we'll give you a lot of information here by reading the comments. Not trying to single anyone out here, I just want to read the comments because it is a YouTube social setting. They are public comments anybody can see, anybody can respond to. I'm just choosing a format which would be like on TikTok where you can video reply to address some of the comments, and this is where I think that a lot of information needs to come in hand, is because not all these comments are very accurate. Now, Joe in his videos stated the payment amounts, but he forgot to mention, so I commented that he forgot to mention that those were 85%, and in Iowa, for many producers, that would not even cover the property tax, to which a reply was received: grew up as a farm kid, and now I'm a retired mechanic. I have never gotten extra money to help me pay for anything from the government. Maybe, which he means maybe, cleaning out the ashtrays when they get full instead of trading pieces of equipment might be a better choice. or stop trying to have the cooler toys than the neighbors and go ahead and get pissed at me. IDC, your opinion isn't the one I have to agree with. Free speech is a real thing for everyone, including you, which I'm about to exercise here in a second. You felt your comment had to be made, so did I. For some unknown reason, YouTube took down my comment response to that guy. I didn't write any profanity or anything into it. Grew up as a farm kid. Okay, great. Now I'm retired from being a mechanic. So in other words, you were a mechanic, not a farmer. Mechanics can set their price, or they can get value out of their worth, meaning that you can go get a different job as to whoever will pay the most. If you're going to work for a Chevy dealership, maybe the Ford will pay you more. A farmer doesn't really have that ability, besides maybe shopping around for somebody willing to pay a little better basis, and then you got to offset the trucking. I have never gotten extra money to help pay anything for never got extra money to help me pay anything from the government. Boy, the way that's written. He should have said, I have never gotten extra money from the government to help me pay anything. Okay, well, you're saying direct payments then. Well, direct payments are what this program is, but at the same time, when you were this mechanic, did the government come in and you're making $15 an hour and now they decide to drop you to $11.50? And yes, I know the government's not directly responsible for that. That's the Federal Reserve. But it was the government that caused the shortage of supply, and then the Federal Reserve had to take measures. I mean, the definition of inflation really is too much money chasing too few goods. And if you look back at a 50-year history of inflation, you'll never see inflation without two factors: an easing cycle from the Federal Reserve at the same time of usually a commodity shortage. We had both those. As far as being a mechanic, times get tough, and maybe you have extra bills come up. It's just like when I was doing the excavation work. You could always take on another job or reduce your rate to get more quantity. You could change the dynamic of things. You could put more extra hours at work, get two jobs even. A farmer really doesn't have any help. I mean, there's really nothing he can do besides changing up his operation, just going to town and getting a secondary job. That's about it. And based on a second job versus the amount of money in and the amount of money out on the farm, especially during a loss cycle, would be next to nothing. Maybe cleaning out the ashtrays when they get full instead of trading a piece of equipment might be a better choice. That's just an ignorant statement right there, because that's just insinuating that everybody's a smoker, and the minute that they trash it out, they just go buy something new. That's a completely false narrative statement, when I could show you 40 farmers within a 20-mile circle are running some pretty old by industry equipment, or stop trying to have cooler toys than the neighbors. There's always a little bit of that goes on, but in our own operation, I like to just buy what I feel works the best, and you have to evaluate new versus used on price, your equity levels. You have to evaluate it on warranty versus repair costs. That's all topic for another video. And then as far as this free speech rant, that's just what I'm exercising in return to him. So this commenter here wrote, I can't wait to see all the new toys the YouTube channels will have. Well, newsflash there, buddy. Most of those YouTube channels are not making the new toys off the farming. They're making it off of YouTube. This commenter here writes, exactly why Cash Rents tills $275 to $300 with $420 new crop prices. It's a bailout for the bankers more than anything. That's true and untrue, because all farmers are in competition with each other, and obviously high prices equal higher rent, because there's usually a margin, and now we're on the loss side of that margin. This guy here writes, I'm a hater of cash renters. I personally agree with that to a certain degree because, you know, cash rent, you're just I'd rather own the ground than farm what I own. That's just me personally, in my opinion. So I don't disagree with that. But at the same time, I totally understand why everybody cash rents, because obviously they're trying to make up extra volume and they don't have the ability to pay for the ground. The reason they don't have the ability to pay for the ground is because their commodities are not worth what it would take to buy the ground, and that's, again, more of a topic. It's a bailout for the bankers more than anything. Well, in a loss cycle, if you only have a certain margin, to lay on the sarcasm, it doesn't take a genius, guys, to go onto Google and look up profit margins. Margins meaning after you have a gross income, and you deduct your expenses, and the difference is your margin. It's the same thing at your house. You make so many dollars per year, and then you deduct your cost to live, and what you have left is your margin. And margins on agriculture or ag farming is extremely low. And that goes back to this guy that commented on mine here, say, with the mechanic. I wonder if he went into Pfizer and complained about the price of pills. You know, maybe you guys shouldn't have bought that new pill sorting table, because, you know, now Pfizer's got a leg up advantage and they're ripping off the public, and this is an outrage, but you guys just got too much overhead. I mean, why are we going into the 1 to 3 percentile profit margins statistically in ag and complaining when you do nothing, or don't even mention, you know, financial service industries, meaning your banks, your pharmaceutical industries, your insurance industries, you know, the things that they have huge overhead on, and 20 to 30% margins after paying those kind of overheads. In fact, most of these kind of commenters are the ones that will gladly go pay their insurance, maybe grumble about it, but they're sure as hell not on social media just blasting it. So what I'm coming to notice is the most common narrative here is it's the farmers themselves within the industry are the most jealous, bitter, and hate-filled. Donald Trump has successfully reduced fentanyl smuggling at the Mexican border. I have no clue what that even has anything to do with this video. Elon's looking at farmhands out. Payments would be welcomed here. I know some farmers already had to liquidate some of their machinery just to stay in business. Tough drought, terrible prices here. Yes, that's what's went on in western Iowa as well. In south central Kansas this morning, it didn't even have a sign-up program. That's what I've been hearing as well, is the programs aren't even really up to par on the websites. And then they have 30 days after the application is turned in to pay. Funny how CFAP sign up. That's very true. And I think that has a lot to do with the government just being flat broke right now, as well as the delayed dates, reduced amounts. It's just the Federal Reserve's not buying treasuries, and then that makes the Treasury have to work within themselves, and they don't have the ability to live within their means within the government, especially now that we have interest payments rolling over at an annual rate that will be higher than most of the tax they take in across the nation. So yeah, the government's in big trouble. Has anyone watched Larson Farms Wealthy? Watch Cole Wealthy. Has anyone watched Zach Johnson Wealthy? This is a scam. That was 3 farmers there that they mentioned, and all 3 of those have large YouTube channels, which are probably paying for more than anything. And furthermore, what I get out of Larson Farms is just a pretty damn good size operation. And again, if you looked at their farm or audited their taxes, what's their profit margin? 5%? Maybe less. It's the YouTube monies where they're building their houses and doing stuff. That, to me, is a comment that goes back to the very first part of this video, and that is a lack of education. Socialism at its finest, 100%. That is not socialism. Again, it's a lack of education there, because if you were to Google the definition of socialism, that would be as if you had a town hall event deciding upon what crops to plant as a community effort. It's not socialism in the slightest bit. It is 100% statism, which by definition is government meddling into free enterprise. That's 100% what it is. Socialism, that word gets kicked around about 50 times in these kind of forums, and that's 100% false. There's a lot of risk to be considered this year. Yes, there is. For Canadian farmers, we look at these payments to U.S. farmers and can't help but ask what our government is doing to help us. We're screwed up here. At least the U.S. government recognizes grain farmers. While I'm not a fan of welfare payments, but at least the U.S. government seems to be trying to help out their farmers. That's a valid point, and I did not realize that about Canada. That stinks for those guys. Well, I suppose the money, this could be, I hate holding the camera and trying to read here. Well, I suppose the money, this could be found by slashing payments for leaving fields fallow. So he's saying just don't plant or put it in like a CRP, I guess. Not good for the soil long term, but for a year, it wouldn't be that harsh, or they'll just print this money will continue to have inflation. Well, technically not, because money inflation really comes from its intended purposes. And if the money that this gets goes to places like John Deere, which puts in the research and development, which can aid in crop production long term, it's just all what ends up. It's what becomes of the money longer term is where inflation really is the root cause down. But just the expansion of money supply, which we don't currently have, we actually have a contraction of it. Again, that's another statement that's completely built on false information. What about American dairy farmers who work like dogs for half a decent living? That's why I have supply management in Canada, crop farmers in the U.S. making YouTube videos about buying equipment and fixing up their dairy. Dairy farmers have had a tough time. Really tough time. I wouldn't want to be a dairy farmer. That's a lot of work. He's right. A hell of a lot of investment for not very much money. Some fringe acres will be planted to something to graze cattle on or raise feed cattle. This will prevent corn from being over 95 million acres. I don't agree with that whatsoever. That's not going to happen. There's a reason that farmers are not getting into cattle. They're older. They've sold their cattle. A lot of them tore their fences out. There's a huge net investment. You got to be able to buy them. If you're buying the cattle to put it out there in acres, you're going to have even less cattle going to market, because that means more will be held back for raising them or whatever. I just really don't see that being a thing. I was reading an article this morning. I screenshotted. I know we signed whatever we needed to a month ago plus. This article says today it's the first day of sign up. This might be a second deal from what I read or reread. I'll be calling the FSA later this morning. Nobody understands the forms of the FSA, not even them. Yes, that's true. They are like informed almost after what's available on the internet or Google. Ridiculous, honestly. They skipping steps. The money allocation process typically takes 90 public commentary period. Why, Joe? 2 words, big oil. I think he's meaning that in terms of like ethanol production, but that's completely false as well. Actually, some of the larger oil companies have been some of the biggest advocates of renewables. I'm not planting any corn. I'm going to keep it damn simple this year. Droughts are coming and things will change. I probably see that as a pretty accurate here, at least in the western Iowa area. I think there's a good chance of a drought. This subsidizing has to stop. Now, by this, I'm assuming he means direct payments, and by subsidizing, I mean he means cash from the government. But subsidies is another one of those terms that's completely inaccurately used all around, because if you spend a little time on the internet, you would quickly realize that subsidies can also be tax codes, which can be beneficial. Even child credit could be a tax subsidy. So if you're going to talk about subsidizing has to stop, you're going to have to talk about a very large spectrum, but however, it always seems to be, at least in my algorithms, only on the farm sides. Ethanol should not be in gasoline. Okay, well, that's your opinion, and that's a bunch of bullshit, because it wasn't up until 2000, and look what was happening. If you want to eliminate ethanol today and immediately remove it from all fuels, you're going to have to go back to things like MTBE for oxygenation, which was cancer causing, as well as you're going to see the price of gasoline skyrocket. And by the way, anybody that thinks that gasoline is going to stay where it's at, no. Gasoline's about to go into higher usage for the summer. It's only the speculators pushing it down right now, and I think you're going to see fuel costs start to increase here pretty soon. This one here is a comment that really got me. I just hope this doesn't change the trajectory of price trends. Machinery has been heading lower, and the bigger shockers, land has even been trading lower from the record in my area last year of 13,250. Last two sales have been 9,200 and 8,500. Still need to be, which by the way, those are different farms than the original one, so I highly doubt they're exact comparisons. Still need to continue going down for guys like me to have a chance. So how does a falling knife? It would be nice to see if the government doesn't screw it up. I want to know how a falling knife is good for anybody. So I wrote, explain why land is going down gives the guy a chance. Land falls, production prices, high grain equals high land prices, and vice versa. Dropping land prices, cheaper grain, good luck getting a bank loan on a falling asset value. Why is a bank not going to loan on a falling asset value? Well, because they want to make sure that it's in an appreciating value. It's pretty hard to use a collateral, meaning what they derive to base debt off of. So if you want to borrow money to buy another farm, that debt's created by backing it with collateral that they know is going to continue growing in value. And they create the money and give it to you. But land, I wrote, never really goes up. In Iowa, farmland has went up by 6% per year. Now, what you have to realize here is the CPI states about 2-3% inflation, but you can pretty much take the CPI, and we'll get into this on a different calculator, but the CPI is always low. The CPI, you could pretty much, if you want to look at real inflation, just double it. The problem here entirely has been that in a long-term period, commodities have went down and inflation has went up. That is an expansion of money supply in a fiat-based asset collateral economy as a reserve currency of the world. And we'll continue talking about that, but that's what I've been talking about on this channel since I started doing these new forms of videos, is it's inflation. It's continuous inflation. So in other words, yeah, land did go up a little more than the inflation, but in real terms, land stayed still. It was just your dollar went down. It took more of those dollars to buy the land. And then he wrote back, spoken like an established guy with a ton of assets, and land bought for a fraction what it goes for now. Well, of course it was a fraction what it went for now. Does that change the margin? You know, grain was a fraction what it is for now. The difference was the margin had more buying power. Younger and or smaller guys have no chance at these prices. People like you with a ton of land already bought cheap can. Well, of course, that's what you use your collateral to borrow against. What you're complaining about there is called capitalism. It's called I mean, what do you want? You want to be like it was when we arrived in 1795 out here in Western Iowa, and you could buy it from the government for fractions of pennies on the dollar compared to what it even is now, inflation adjusted? That's capitalism. Things that are least most traded are the things that go up the most. I don't know what world you're living in, but land prices and grain prices have not had a correlation for decades. We'll come back to that. I have a much easier time getting a loan on $7,000 land with $4 corn than I will at $14,000 land at $550 corn. Remove the stack of cash you have in your account and write a check for it. And place yourself in the shoes of someone else to come down a little down payment perspective. I know it's hard for the boomers to do. That's the dumbest ass statement I've ever seen in my life. If corn was $4 and land was $7,000. And now you're saying it's $14,550. Well, newsflash, if it was $7,000 and you had $4 corn, and then we had another round of inflation, in other words, currency devaluation, and it went to $14,000, but corn only went to $550, the problem wasn't the corn. The problem's exactly what I just said. The problem was the land went up with inflation, and inflation adjusted as an average, and your commodities didn't. That's the problem. And if you think that land's going to peel back to 7, it's not, because it may go way up and then come back here, but if you still strike a line up through it, that's still an average, and in Iowa over 20 years, that's been a 6% gain average. Meanwhile, your price of your commodities, which I just got done showing in the last video, haven't moved. This is a chart here. This is going back to his comment about it doesn't follow price up. So this is a chart here. This is the year, and this is our county. So let's look about right in here, where 7 and 8, where the price of grain really started going up. What happened to land as it started going up? Then in '09 we had a deflationary drop. But look what it dropped back to. It didn't drop back that much. It popped back a little, then it started going back up again. And it went way up as the grain went up. Here's the grain prices. See, they started going up, then it went way up. And take a look at this. You see right in here, you see grain or land was actually starting to pull back a little bit. Then we was starting to deflate a little bit. And all of a sudden we started propping asset values up. Because the only way you can back money expansion is with collateral. Meaning you have to have enough collateral to back the expansion of the money. So in other words, it has to grow exponentially. Do I see a decline off the peak? Well, it looks like we're already declining. So by 25, it'll be down a little more. Then by 26, it might start coming back up again because we've devalued currency very heavily. That's what's happened throughout the entire course of time. And it always follows inflation, which again, inflation was too much money chasing too few goods. And what did we just have? We had the COVID money chasing goods. We had it right in here. Look what happened. Look what happened in the 70s. Same thing. I hope you guys pause your screen to view this. This is a complete prime example of another kid who's mad and angry at the world that doesn't understand being a failed education system and lack of equal opportunity, which only drives more extremes in politics because they're going to look at that politician that gives them a lot of false promises as the be-all, save-all to their life problems. And the truth is, every single one of them ends up being the reason that they continue to have greater life problems. It's capitalism on the way out the door, and most people don't even understand it. Thanks for watching.